On the 8th of April 2005, 23-year-old Emer O Loughlin was on a day off from college because of the funeral of Pope John Paul II. It would be her last day alive. Emer grew up in Ennistamon, a market town in County Clare. It was blighted by emigration and unemployment. There were few prospects for the young generation, and many of them left, including Emer's older sister, Pamela. She went to England when she was 16. Emer would have only been around 4 or 5 years of age at the time, so Pamela didn't really get to see Emer grow up, but she would keep in constant contact with her and look forward to seeing her when she came home. Ireland was a pretty grim place to live in the 1980s. Emer was a happy little child. She could nearly sing before she could talk. She loved dogs and ponies, and her dad even bought her a small Welsh pony, and she loved that pony like no other. She'd even bring him into the house. When Emer was 9 years of age, her parents split up and her mother moved to Dublin. But Emer didn't want to go, so she stayed with her dad, Johnny. They went everywhere together. Her dad described her as his shadow. When she went to secondary school, i.e. high school, she was quiet and kind-hearted. She related to the teachers very well, but she also got on well with her peers. She was a good listener, a natural leader, and had plenty of self-confidence, but not arrogant. She would speak her mind, and that stood out. She had good organisational skills, which came in handy in transition year in school. Transition year was usually 4th year, and you'd be around 16 years of age. It was a kind of year off academically, where you'd get to go out into the world and do voluntary work or work experience in different businesses and companies, in whatever interested you. Also, you would take part in the mini company competition, where each group in each class would have to set up a mini company, and then you'd be put forward to national level, and if you won, you'd get a chance to set up the business for real. This is where Emer would shine, and they won the competition. She loved art, and her favourite thing to draw was daffodils. She wanted also to do photography, but her dad couldn't afford a camera. But that didn't deter Emer. She would go on to be an artist. When she left school, she gave herself some time to decide what route she was going to take in becoming an artist. She worked in the local town while she was deciding and continuing to live with her dad. She went to the Netherlands for 2 years and worked on the tulip farms, and then went on to Thailand with her boyfriend Shane for 3 months. Emer did a lot of growing up in this time, but home is really where they wanted to be. So when they came home, they bought a mobile home and put it on Shane's land, in the hope of saving money and building their own house someday. The area they were living on was Ballyborna, which is close to the Clare-Galway border, and in the area of the Burn, County Clare. The Burn, meaning rocky place, is part of the Wild Atlantic Way, and if any of you ever make it over here to Ireland, it is definitely worth doing. There's a scenic drive you can take. It's a 150-kilometre journey where you will see no landscape like it. It's absolutely breathtaking. The Burn is renowned for its remarkable assembly of plants and animals, and over 70% of Ireland's species of flower are found here. The region supports Arctic, Alpine and Mediterranean basin plants side by side due to the unusual environment. The spot where Emer and Shane picked to live was a very isolated area, and they only had one neighbour living nearby named John Griffin, who also lived in a mobile home. Shane worked, but Emer didn't. She spent all her time taking photographs and painting, but soon she was inspired to enrol in the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology, studying photography and art. It was a 2.5-hour commute each day to college, but Emer was happy to do it. In April of 2005, she had just got accepted into the National College of Art and Design in Dublin for the September of the same year. Emer was elated. It gave her the recognition of having talent as an artist. She even shouted her mother to tell her, and even asked could she stay with her while she was in college. And her mother was more than delighted to say yes, as she hadn't lived with Emer since she was 9. On a personal note, I'm so happy that they kept a close bond with each other, and that Emer wanted to live with her mam, and her mam wanted it also. So this brings us to Friday the 8th of April 2005. Emer's college was closed due to Pope John Paul's funeral, but Shane, her boyfriend, had work that day. For some reason, they had no electricity at the mobile home and Emer needed to charge her phone. So Shane suggested to her to call to John Griffin to see would he mind charging it. Shane left for work and it would be the last time he would ever see Emer alive. A few hours later, Shane received a phone call that his neighbour's mobile home was on fire. I think as it was on Shane's family's land, that is why he was phoned first. People back then would burn on their land, especially in remote areas. So I'd say the caller wasn't sure if the fire was intentional or not, and they didn't want to be ringing the emergency services for nothing. So basically Shane would have been responsible to ring the Gardaí. Shane made his way onto the land and saw John Griffin's mobile engulfed in flames. He rang the Gardaí and emergency services and they arrived at around 4 p.m. Upon examination of the fire, they discovered the remains of a body, but Shane was convinced it was too small for it to be Emer. Shane was frantic at this stage and he couldn't find her. There was no disturbance at Shane and Emer's mobile home. Her keys, her wallet was there, and her dogs were loose. If Emer was to ever go anywhere, she'd always tie up the dogs before she left. There was also no sign of John Griffin. Shane tried Emer's mobile, but there was no answer. Shane rang Emer's father and brother to tell them that Emer was missing, and they headed straight up to Ballyborna. They searched the landscape but could not find her. Emer's brother then decided to go to Dublin and tell his mother that Emer was missing and there had been a fire at the neighbour's mobile home.
I was sitting beside the bed and he knelt down in front of me and he said, "Ma'am, I've bad news for you." And he just said, there was a fire in another caravan next to Emer's, but Emer can't be found.
John then flew to England to tell his sister Pamela, as it is not news you tell over the phone. They both flew straight home to Ireland, and at this stage everything was pointing to the body in the fire being Emer, as she was still missing. Straight away Gardaí wanted to find John Griffin, to rule him out as being the body in the fire and to get any information they could if he was alive. That night it was discovered that he had spent the night before at his family's house in Galway City and he didn't know anything about the fire. John Griffin was living illegally on Shane's land. He was known to Gardaí because he was previously convicted for assault and drug offences in Galway. He lived out in the sticks, as we call it, and a bit of a loner. 2 days later, after the fire, John Griffin became erratic. He took the ferry to the island of Inishmore and barricaded himself inside Dunangus Fort. He was pelting stones at people visiting the fort and Gardaí were called to sort him out. At the time, Griffin had a long beard and dreadlocks and was very intimidating looking. After a standoff of around 5 hours, eventually Griffin was brought to St. Bridget's Psychiatric Hospital in Ballinasloe. Meanwhile, Emer's family were waiting on a post-mortem result. She was so badly burnt that she had to be identified by DNA. The family were devastated. She was only 23 years old. At the time of the post-mortem, they couldn't identify how Emer died, but they were suspicious of the circumstances. 5 days later, after Gardaí brought Griffin to the psychiatric hospital, he cut off his dreadlocks and shaved his beard, signed himself out and made his way back to Inishmore Island. His ticket was bought under a false name. Clothing belonging to him was found at Dunangus Cliffs. They were left in a neat pile, but no body was found. They searched the sea and shoreline over the next few days, but there was nothing. Griffin would have been familiar with Inishmore as he had family there. Gardaí wanted to question Griffin, even though it couldn't be determined how Emer died. It was suspicious that her body was found in Griffin's mobile home, and his behaviour afterwards was unusual, and now he was missing. The funeral of Emer took place 2 weeks after her death. They waked her at home and then she was brought to the church. It was a massive funeral. Family, the community, people from her college all turned up. Her uncle played the accordion and sang "Going Home," and everyone was in tears. Emer's poor mother was in such shock she couldn't understand why her coffin was closed, and it was so difficult to explain to her why. Right from the beginning, the Gardaí referred to Emer as a death and not a murder because they didn't know how she died. Basically, the family buried her not knowing. They were still looking for Griffin and warned people that if anyone was harbouring him or helped him escape, they would be prosecuted. Pamela called for Emer's body to be exhumed, and in 2010, through the cold case team, 5 years after Emer died, this was put into play. A second post-mortem was done on Emer, and it was discovered she died a violent death. Her throat was slashed with a machete-type knife, which happened to be recovered from the scene of the fire. She was badly beaten also, and she died before the fire was set. She put up a fight for sure. This is what the family had been waiting for. Finally, her death would be treated as a murder. 5 years in the making, and finally Griffin was officially a murder suspect. But a lot of time had been lost. The Gardaí put out a warrant through Interpol and Europol to find Griffin and have him arrested for Emer's murder. Crime Stoppers also put out a reward for information of his whereabouts, but no one came forward. As for motive, her dad reckons that Emer saw something Griffin didn't want her to know about, but it may have been something sexual, but no evidence was recovered from the body. It's all speculation really, and it won't bring Emer back, but I think the why is always at the forefront of loved ones' minds. It was believed that Griffin was in England, then Germany, and then Morocco. It was also revealed that Griffin had a Celtic tattoo across the front of his neck, but it was later revealed that this was false and it was actually an Egyptian tattoo, the Eye of Horus, which I'm sure he has since had removed, but the scars would still be there, or he had it covered up. When they issued the wanted poster, they didn't show the tattoo. They have had numerous reports of sightings over the years, and Pamela has kept in contact with the Gardaí, and it was stated to her that he is such a troublemaker, he's bound to get into trouble sooner or later. A lot of comfort that must bring them, not. The Gardaí have said the case is ongoing and they can't release any new information. While this is fine for the public, no information is being given to the family either, which you'd imagine would be a given. There seems to be a lack of cooperation between the Gardaí and the media, with wrong information being given out. The media could be the best asset the Gardaí have in order to find Griffin, but this does not seem to cross the Gardaí's mind. They should be all working together to find him. If Griffin is in Morocco, there is no extradition agreement between Ireland and Morocco. It is now 17 years since Emer was murdered, and Griffin has still not been found, and the case remains open. In 2016, Emer's mother passed away after a long illness, without any closure. The people that knew and cherished Emer still miss her every day, and her memory is honoured in the school she attended. In 2007, they established an award, the Emer O Loughlin Award for Transition Student of the Year, to commemorate her and the hard work and leadership that she displayed while she attended that school.
So, seo here an gradam atá a gwein hosni Emer gachéad sa seach the Emer O Loughlin Award and Transition Year Student of the Year on scaláire idirblíne chun comóra dhéanamh de Emer agus an sais obair agus ceannach de bhí cí féin nuair bhí sí mar scaláire san idirbhlín mar bhí sí go hiontach mar sin. Picture an seo fóras tháinig sé as bosca cúpla láithín Emer agus cuidas na scaláirí san idirbhlín bhúdar dúis náisiúnta is cíndam mar rinneadar troscáin san mini company de fáistí óga agus bhí an taide agus an obair le déanamh chun an rud go léir chuir le chéile agus Emer a bhí gceannas chun an rud go léir chuir bord agus chuir le chéile.
Shane, Emer's boyfriend, was absolutely heartbroken over her death. He has never given interviews or appeared on TV, but he did put up a wooden cross on the site she died on, in memory of the love he had for her. I'd imagine it's very hard on him as he owns the land where they were planning to build their future. Emer's dad bought a boat and named it Lady Emer, and he loves people asking him about the name as it's an excuse to talk about her to anyone who will listen, which I'm sure there's plenty. Pamela, her sister, set up a Facebook group for Emer to gather information to help try and catch Griffin. She updates this quite regular. I'll leave a link in the description, you just never know.